Hello and welcome to Views on News. I'm Jawad Tehami. In today's program, we are going to take up for discussion two important developments: the economic situation of the country with improved economic indicators, and also Finance Minister Mohammed Aurangzeb's talk regarding as to the improvement on the economic front and that determination of the government in order to steer the country's economy in the direction towards progress, prosperity, as well as development. The other relates to upcoming AMAN Exercises 25 and the inaugural AMAN Dialogue in the lead up to that particular AMAN Exercises 2025. Let's begin with the first one. Pakistan's Finance Minister Mohammed Aurangzeb, in an interview on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum, has said that Pakistan's current and rapidly improving economic situation, and also he has expressed the government's determination to achieve the sustainable export-led growth rate of 6% by 2028. He has also said during the current fiscal year, the tax is worth 1,300 billion rupees will be collected. Also, the government of Pakistan's finance division in its monthly outlook and update has said, let me quote, Pakistan's economy has demonstrated sustained positive developments during July to November fiscal year 2025, indicating an optimistic outlook for the ongoing fiscal year. Macroeconomic fundamentals have strengthened, marked by a further deceleration in CPI inflation, with stable food prices, effective fiscal consolidation, resulting in fiscal surplus, current account surplus, supported by increased exports and remittances, and an accommodated monetary policy stance. These developments have bolstered the business and consumer confidence, reflected in significant private sector credit uptake and a sharp rise in the Pakistan Stock Exchange. Prudent fiscal management and strategic reforms are paving the way for sustainable economic growth. Let me bring in our esteemed panel of guests who are joining us both in the studio as well as online to discuss the overall situation of the country's economy. For that, we are honored to being joined in the studio by Dr. UsmanChohan. He's an economist. Dr. Chohan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. On Skype, at the same time, we are honored to being joined by Dr. KhaqanNajeeb, a former advisor, Ministry of Finance. Dr. Najeeb, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Dr. Chohan, if you allow me, let me begin the discussion with Dr. Najeeb. Dr. Najeeb, as per your understanding, looking at the improved indicators overall, this monthly economic update and outlook of the finance division also talks of that. Finance minister has also talked of that. How do you look at what it required on the part of the government in order to steer the country's economy in the right direction in the recent past?
So Jawad, since we've gone with the IMF engagement, Pakistan's reserves, which were under $4 billion and did not even cover 1 month of imports, have now grown to nearly $12 billion, covering comfortably around 2.5 months of imports. So that's the first element of macro stability. The second element is that your inflation, which was, in high double digits, around 29% in 23, then, around 23.4% in 24, has gone down. And in this year, we hope the first 6 months have averaged near 7.1 or 2%. So hopefully, we are well within single digits. And your current account, which had a big deficit when we were not engaged with the fund, has actually shown a surplus of nearly $1 billion in the first 5 month, in the first 6 month data, in fact, that we have seen. So you have stability, you have a comfortable external position. You have some growth in exports as well. The energy situation has picked up slightly, though it's been down for the last 2 years. Your large-scale manufacturing is still negative. Hopefully, with the markup rate, or what you call the policy rate of the state bank, which was hovering around 22%, has come down substantively. And one hopes that with these inflationary figures, you'll also see some more easing as, you have, I think it's on the 27th, the next monetary
Marked
policy
improvement
committee.
in the indicators. There is a marked improvement in the indicators overall. I'll come back to you to specifically talk about a couple of other areas that you've already mentioned in your take. Let me bring in Mr. Chohan into the discussion also. Dr. Chohan, now as to the challenges with this particular government, what were those major challenges that the government had to put in some measures in order to steer the economy in the right direction?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for having me. The biggest challenge that the government had faced in the last 2 years, which is not just us, but the world as a whole, was a severe rise in the cost of living, as also expressed by inflation, but not only inflation. Because inflation and cost of living are two different things, and even as our inflation is coming down now, cost of living is still quite high for people because their wages aren't catching up with that. The fact is that as global inflation came down, we saw a lot of breathing room for the economy, for households, for businesses, and for the government. And this has become a kind of cyclical thing where COVID had a huge stimulus, then you had this contraction of interest rates, and now you have things easing up. And so looking forward, I think over the next 3 years, because Aurangzeb Saab, our finance minister, has said that out to 2028 we want 6% growth. I hope it happens, and I think it is possible, but we have to realize that the 2020s have been a particularly turbulent and volatile decade, so it's actually very hard to tell what the next 5 years will be like before something else happens, God forbid. That's, I think, the big consideration.
Okay, so you already mentioned of inflation going down considerably. We have also seen it has gone down considerably in the last couple of months from what it used to be around 30 plus points, 38%, and coming to 4.9 in November. Now, it's a considerable reduction, but you also mentioned that the expenses of the people as their wages are not meeting up that particular pace.
That's right.
Could you a little bit, elaborate a little bit on that? How is it not matching up, and what do we understand with this particular figure of inflation being reduced considerably?
Thank you for this important question. Inflation is the change in the prices over time, so it's a rate, and that rate has slowed down. So if you see a 4.9% figure, you are comparing November of last year versus the year before that, and it's still increased by 5%. So it's slowed down, but it's a rate, and unless that rate was negative, you would still see some increase in prices. That's one thing, and it's good that it's coming down. We're very happy with that. But cost of living is more about your income versus the expenses of a household. And the fact that we had 30%, as you correctly noted, rise in inflation meant that the cost of living became difficult, which means if a household has a basket of things it has to consume, the most essential in that might be the ones that have risen the most. For example, energy has risen and food prices have risen. The most recent economic report that you quoted is correct that it's stable, but it's stable at a high number. And so we'd actually like it to come down. And there are ways to work around that to bring cost of living eases. And if you've seen in the last year elections, it was a big election year for many countries in 2024, including us. Many governments fell because of this inflation and cost of living specifically issue.
Right, Dr. G, what could be those measures in order to ease the cost of living?
So, Pakistan has seen higher inflation in the last 3 years. Moving forward, what we need to do is, a twofold approach. One, if you want to maintain, a low inflationary environment, which, the target that the government and the state bank set for themselves, which is a 5 to 7% inflationary target over the long term. One, you have to really improve the productivity of the economy, which means your agriculture productivity should improve so that cost comes down. Your energy efficiency should improve so that energy going into the inflation should not be that high as you move forward. And then overall, you must maintain a good balance, a monetary policy, which is neither too, open in the sense that it's not too easy and it's not too restraining. So that right monetary stance has to be maintained. I think these are the three things that Pakistan needs to do. But on the other side, what we need to do is take the important measures which improve the growth potential of the economy. The only way to improve people's lives in the long run is to give them opportunity, job. The only way for people to come out of poverty, it is not income support, it is not giving them freebies, it is to give them employment, productive employment, make them members of a growing economy. For that, what Pakistan needs is deregulation, believing in a market economy, believing that energy efficiency will come if we are to revamp the energy sector. Let's stick with these three things. And of course, an orientation on manufacturing, which is export oriented, FDI in the country, which is again export oriented. But if you were to believe in all this, then you have the right time. And I keep saying this, Jawad, when we used to talk a year and a half ago, I only and only used to talk to you about getting the IMF deal done. Now, where you stand is that the space and the time have both been given to you because you have stabilized the economy with the IMF. You have your rollovers that have been done. Now the hard work begins, and this whole revamping of the economy, reform, changing the structures at many places, bringing your expenditures down. That's another very, very important thing. If the government spends more than it earns, it borrows. It's again very inflationary. If you want to change all this scenario down to a more, affordable level, to an economy which is supportive of high growth, you have to have macro stability. It's a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. The conditions are what I've mentioned to you. Within that framework, we must also remember 20th February onwards, whenever the dates are finalized, an IMF mission will be in town. I have recently written a very detailed review of Pakistan's position of the first 6 months as it went through the IMF benchmarks. Many of our benchmarks are not met. We have shortfalls on QPCs, indicative targets, structural benchmarks. That's okay. You need to build a story so that you are able to convince the fund that why the shortfalls were there, what are the measures you are taking to ensure that those shortfalls are overcome, and what is your path forward for the next budget. All these things will come under discussion when you have the team. I really hope that all
given the fact if there happen to be any of shortfalls, as you have already mentioned, but when there happens to be the first review of this particular extended fund facility program at the end of February, what about the commitment that we have witnessed of the authorities in order to steer the economy and put in those tough conditions which were set by the International Monetary Fund?
So I think they've done well. One can say that. We said we'll take the reserves to over 12 billion. We are, nearly there. We said that, we will not have the government borrow from the state bank. We haven't borrowed from the state bank. I think we said we'd have a primary surplus. We have a primary surplus. But on the tax side, we have a huge shortfall of 386 billion rupees. On the trader side of getting 50 billion, the Tajir scheme, we again have a shortfall. Doing the agriculture income tax in all the 4 provinces, legislative framework, I don't think we've been able to do that. So where we have a good story to tell, I think on the same time, we have shortfalls that we have to have a candid discussion. I'm hoping that the target of the circular debt remaining within a certain benchmark has also been met. Then there are the structural benchmarks. On the structural benchmarks also, I think there are issues that need to be discussed on the wealth fund and that we had to create. I think we had to amend the act. I don't think we have been able to do that. Then, the risk management measures in the LTU. So it's a comprehensive set of 22 structural benchmarks, out of which a number has to be met within the first 6 months. So I'm really hoping that most of them would be met. Where there is deficiency, there will be a story. And that's how a fund program works. So I think the first real task now is to ensure that the February or early March review is done comfortably. When the mission is going back, and we'll talk again at that time, there is a staff level agreement between the visiting mission and the Pakistan authorities. And then, of course, if you get that...
I get your point, Dr. Najeeb. Let me take a quick opinion from Dr. Chohan also. Dr. Chohan, what's your expectation regarding as to what could be that strength or the position from where the Pakistani authorities would be able to convince that our intention and the commitment and the determination was unshaken while implementing those tougher conditions that the IMF had already set for Pakistan to steer the economy in the right direction in the upcoming review?
Well, basically there's two elements to any response that one has as an authority. One is the rhetoric and one is the action. On the rhetoric, we get 100 out of 100 because we have never had any flinching. It's an unflinching commitment to get this program done. On the action side, it wasn't that the government faced it or fell short. It is also that it is a complex society and that many other agents need to also get on board. For example, this traders not being on board, or for example, certain provincial bureaucratic institutions not being on board. These sorts of hurdles make it hard for the Federation alone to carry the weight of what needs to be done. That's, I think, part of the story that has to be discussed with the IMF, that look, we did do a lot. It ain't easy to do this kind of stuff, but we are 100% on board. Some things will take longer, but that commitment is there. And then we have to look at why it's not being done. I mean, how long do you want to be a trading nation that puts up with the traders? I don't think that that's the best way to add productivity to a society anyways. You should be a society of producers rather than a society of traders anyways. So these are the kinds of things where you do need to use some form of force to get your agenda fulfilled in the national interest. So that's one thing to consider. And then when the IMF does come by at the end of February, it will look at it and it probably will be quite lenient because it also realizes that this was a program that was negotiated in a crisis situation, right? The beginning of 2024, end of 2023. And the world is different now. And so long as Pakistan does demonstrate a reasonable amount of work, and I think that we have demonstrated a reasonable amount of work, then it is possible to keep going, and then further reviews will add to substantiate the work that has to be done.
Right. Dr. Najeeb, now the finance minister has set a target of 6% export-led growth. We have also seen most recently authorities launched the UDAN program. The first and the foremost E of those 5 E's is exports. What steps are required in order to achieve that particular target, which has been set by the finance minister by year 2028?
So one should go back and see that, we have had strategic trade policy frameworks where, we set, these kinds of targets and we remained far, far away from them. The first idea is to believe that you want to be an exporting nation, but then, to really come through as what do you want to sell to the world? What is it that is competitive enough that we are able to sell to the world? How do you create an ambiance, ease of doing business, cost of doing business, which export markets beyond textile, which is 60% of your exports and is like a sunset industry? How do you want to do it? What is the role of agriculture in this? What is the role of IT and ITES? What is the role of the service sector? So sometimes I think that, we've been talking about made in Pakistan, brand Pakistan. I think maybe that stage hasn't come. Maybe we need to be part of the global value chain. So the ideas are right. The aspiration is right to get to a $60 billion target in the next 5 years. You need to probably have a growth of 15-16%. Now that's quite a bit of growth where, Pakistan has found it difficult to cross the $32 billion mark. Now, can we deregulate the economy? Can we create the energy sector efficiencies? I think that all will play into whether we are actually able to do this or not. This is the first time in history that in the first 6 months, your remittances are $1 billion higher than your exports. So, we really have to think that why is it that we are not being able to become an exporting nation? Our FDI in the country also has to, come into the productive sectors now, which are export oriented. Then there is mines and minerals potential. Hopefully by 2029, we should be able to get something from there also. I think it's a serious uphill task. In the long run, of course, how do you train your human resource? How do you get children into vocational training? How do you get children into schools? How do you improve the quality of labor in Pakistan? How do you improve the quality of agriculture in Pakistan, where the yields are at times 1/3 or half of what the world is doing? So one has to believe that with this time and space, with this macro stability, which is a sufficient but not a necessary condition for growth, what has the world done to create a truly deregulated market economy? 90s, we saw India do it. We've seen recently China do it. We are seeing Vietnam into it. So one thing is pretty clear, right? It's a doable story. If Indonesia, Malaysia, if all these
Dr.
countries...
Najeeb, it's a doable story, but it is an uphill task, as you already mentioned, and a lot of efforts are required on that particular front. Also, please stay with us for a couple of moments. Let me take a quick opinion from Dr. Chohan also. Then I'll have to move to the second segment of the show. Dr. Chohan, export-led growth, a target of 6% by 2028. The recommendations.
Actually, I'm very, very worried about things that are happening outside of our control. The world is changing in a way that having these targets may have been feasible a decade ago, but it's not feasible now because it's not our fault. The problem is that, for example, Trump and his administration plan to set tariffs at a very high level, and they've started the study as of yesterday, and within 6 months they will be able to have a legal basis for slapping tariffs left, right, and center. This makes a very protectionist world model. That's not our fault, but it will be a thing. And the second thing is with this, tools such as AI, even our freelance and IT-oriented stuff is in danger because there was a big value-added portion of having people do that component of the IT value chain. If AI decimates this, then it is countries such as Pakistan that will face it. So maybe we have to think about how the world is changing and then what we really need to add to it, because if we have the same static model as before in a dynamic environment, you might be ready to export at 6%, but there's all these barricades, or AI has taken a lot of the work, and so keep in mind how the world is changing as well.
Dr. UsmanChohan, economist, joining us in the studio. Thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. On Skype, we were joined by Dr. KhaqanNajeeb, former advisor, Ministry of Finance. Dr. KhaqanNajeeb, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of this segment of the show. After a short break, we'll be talking about the upcoming AMAN exercises 2025. For that, stay tuned. Welcome back to Views on News, and in this particular segment we are going to talk about the upcoming AMAN exercises by Pakistan Navy, and these exercises are going to be held from 7th to 11th of February 2025, and more interestingly, this year AMAN Dialogue 2025 is also going to be held, which is going to be co-hosted by National Institute of Maritime Affairs along Pakistan Navy. It will be held from 8th to 10th of February, and the theme of AMAN Dialogue 2025 is Secure Seas, Prosperous Future. And today, National Institute of Maritime Affairs in Islamabad unveiled the logo for this AMAN Dialogue. So without wasting any further moment, let me bring in a very special guest who is joining us in the studio. Mr. Vice Admiral retired Ahmed Saeed, Hilal Imtiaz Military. He's the president of the National Institute of Maritime Affairs. Admiral Saeed, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. And heartiest congratulations on unveiling of this particular logo of the AMAN Dialogue, the inaugural AMAN Dialogue. So let's specifically talk about the logo first. It's quite a colorful logo. I can see the sun on the horizon. I can see a ship, a lighthouse, and dolphins as well, and then there are 4 stars. What all these symbols actually signify and symbolize?
Thank you very much. Keeping in view the significance of the AMAN Dialogue, a lot of brainstorming was conducted so that we come up with a design which truly represents our aspirations, which is the overall theme of the exercise AMAN, that is Together for Peace. So, starting from the rising sun, that is dawn giving you the hope, that is a new era in which now we are going into, new challenges are coming up. So next is the lighthouse, a traditional one that gives the direction to the ships. What is the safe passage? And then the ship itself is depicting the maritime security infrastructure which we have at sea. The dolphins, of course, they depict the intelligent species which cohabit at sea, and it's a very intelligent species. And then again, that is also our depicts the Indus dolphin also. Last but not the least, is the 4 stars. 4 stars are actually interlacing the stakeholders. That starts from the top, if we say the maritime leadership, then is the maritime practitioners, those who are the seafarers at sea, and then is the academia and the researchers, those are linked with the maritime issues, and the last is the maritime industry, which has a huge stake in this entire security paradigm. So this all together makes this one logo.
So quite a logo with lots of colors, lots of themes embedded into one single particular frame. So talking about Dialogue 2025, this year it is going to be the inaugural Dialogue. What was the need of bringing Dialogue in the lead up to exercises, and what is expected? How bigger an impetus do you think Dialogue is going to give to the overall desired results of the exercises?
Yes, from 2007 we have transited till to date, and this is the 9th session which we will be going into. So earlier on we started off only with the AMAN exercises, and then we added into the conference, then we added the exercises of special forces, then we added last AMAN exercise we had the exhibition also. But in this particular exercise now we have added the AMAN Dialogue and the exhibition and the conference. It has been detached, and it will be conducted towards the end of this year. So AMAN Dialogue is actually a very conclusive kind of a platform in which all these stakeholders, they will be there. So emerging challenges which are at sea, that will be talked about. In the conference normally you do not come to a lot of conclusions, but here there will be an actionable recommendations which will be subsequently pursued, and it will be logically concluded. That is the ultimate aim of the dialogue. So all the recommendations which will be coming here towards the end of the year, once we will go into the conference and to the industry. So these are the challenges and problems will be put across there, and then a roll-on will be taking place in which those challenges will be mitigated.
Right, talking specifically about the theme secure seas and prosperous future. How the world is going to manifest a prosperous future given the significance of secure seas in the age of more enhanced connectivity?
Right, like 80% of the trade is at sea, and for Pakistan it is 90%. So all the more reasons we need to have a mechanism at sea in which our trades lanes are very secure. So about 40% of the overall sea is under the jurisdiction of maritime nations, that is under the United Nations law of the Sea Law of the Convention, 1982. But rest of the 60% is it is not under the jurisdiction of the countries. So that is called the high seas. For that, we need to have a collaborative mechanism where all the other seafaring nations, they group together and they form up certain mechanisms to make these seas secure for us. So coming to your question is that how it is being done, you can take the example of Bab al-Mandab, where the immediate reaction of the world was that this is a very critical choke point which needs to be guarded. So Task Force 153 was made by under the UN auspices, led by the USA. But some of the nations, they are doing independently as well, which includes Pakistan also.
Right. You already today during that unveiling ceremony, you emphasized the strengthening of maritime partnerships. That you just alluded to that particular fact. Could you shed a bit of more light regarding as to these particular partnerships? And in the case of Pakistan, where Pakistan actually looks forward to enhance these partnerships in maritime domain?
It can be divided into two main categories. One is the security, and second is the industrial part. So in terms of security, in 2002, like after the 9/11, 2001, 2002, CMF was made. That was the collective security mechanism by the United States, and Pakistan also came partner to it. That is 150 and 151. Two task forces were made, one for the security, and other was for the piracy, anti-piracy. So these are the mechanisms in which Pakistan has been working, and Pakistan is a very active participant. Even day before yesterday, I think 151 task force has been being commanded by the Pakistan Commodore. So these are the mechanisms in which Pakistan works. Under the UN auspices, there are a lot of other mechanisms in which Pakistan is actively participating. Second is the collaboration in the maritime industrial domain, in which we have to become party to the global supply chain, in which the ports have to be linked, in which the shippings have to be linked, in which our industry has to be linked. So that is where we are working. Already the Ministry of Maritime Affairs, they are taking very drastic steps. So our shipping policy has been reviewed. Similarly, our fishing policies are being reviewed. We didn't have earlier on the aquaculture policy, and that has been introduced. So these are the things on which I think their local partnership as well as the international partnerships will have to come into play.
Right. So these two basic domains, the security domain and also the maritime industrial domain. I'll come to the second one later on during the course of our conversation. Regarding the security side of it, what are the emergent challenges at this particular point in time? What is the identification and what policies are being chalked out in order to mitigate those?
Earlier on, traditionally, security used to be safeguarding the parameters of or the sea frontiers of Pakistan. But now, of late, the security has taken a bigger meanings, in which now we have a lot of challenges coming up, which are including the fishing, illegal fishing, which is taking place at sea, piracy taking at sea, then smuggling, narcotics, and then human smuggling, and then above all, new challenges is the climate change. It has also been taken now as a security. If we do not look into it, so it will start hurting our economy. So for that now a new term is being used as a green defense. That means the forces will have to look into these policies and implement at sea.
Green defense is quite a novel term. And regarding that, you already mentioned about when we talk about this particular logo of the AMAN Dialogue, the dolphins, the intelligent species. Now, during today's conversation, it was also revealed during that unveiling of the logo that they have moved at quite a considerable distance from the shores of Pakistan. The reason being climate change and its adverse impacts?
I think both ways. Number one is the human-induced challenges, that is primarily the pollution. Earlier on, about 35 years ago, when we were at sea, we used to see the dolphins coming into the harbor, Karachi harbor also. But now, because of this pollution, the dolphins have gone much towards the seaside. So this is one of the, I think, challenges which we have to mitigate. And otherwise, other challenges which are related to the sea rising, which are related to the rise in temperature, those are there. But mainly, I would say this is the reason.
Right. So how we are going to see the manifestation of this green defense, this particular phenomenon?
Green defense is, it has been recently coined under the UN. It was in November 2024. UN Institute of Disarmament, they had released a report in which they had given this one being one of the challenge. So this is squarely dealing with the all those challenges which are related to the environment. So against that, we will have to develop the defenses because our coast is badly being corroded. Pollutions, as I already told you, sea rising is another issue. A lot of other things are coming up. So we will have to check out some comprehensive policy under the overall National Action Plan to mitigate those effects.
Right. You identified a number of challenges when it comes to the security domain. What about, are there any nations or countries which don't go by the book or they don't act responsibly? Does that happen to be a challenge also at times when it comes to abiding by the law of seas?
Normally, I would say all the countries, as far as the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, they are abiding by. But there are certain differences in understanding as well. So it is basically interpretation of the laws, which is being done differently by certain nations. So that is creating a little stress at sea. Like freedom of navigation is one of the terms which the Americans, and the Westerns, they use it with the different connotations, and the Chinese primarily and certain other countries, they use it in different parameters. So under these conditions, now I think on all these issues, UN is coming up with legislation. We are looking towards that to clarify those things so that these are to be understood in its true literal spirit.
Right. More global participation in armed exercises. What does that basically signify? A trust in the endeavors of Pakistan Navy?
We can say in three dimensions. First is that Pakistan's ability to convince the maritime community that Pakistan is a responsible state. So that is the first parameter in which that's the reason a lot of countries are coming. Second is our geostrategic location, that we are at the confluence of the major civilizations, the Persia, the Indian and the Chinese and the Central Asian Republic. So this also makes us very, I would say, lucrative area where everybody is looking towards. And the third one is, of course, that our maritime diplomacy is playing very superior, and in that these countries have a lot of confidence in us. So this is how we are, I would say.
Right. Another term that was very frequently used, blue economy. Blue economy, how is it differentiated from maritime economy? There was a differentiation that was made by you there as well during the unveiling also. First of all that, and also when it comes to blue economy, vis-a-vis Pakistan, the significance of Gawada port and also the Indian Ocean?
Thank you. Just going back in 1972 in Stockholm Declaration, actually that is the first point when the world realized that the way we are using the potential of maritime economy, it is going to degrade very soon. So it was equally thought about the land resources as well as for the sea. So on land it is called the green economy, on the seaside it is the blue economy. Three strands were defined, in which first strand was that we should take responsibility as being the human being of this planet, as a guardian of this planet, that we should take the responsibility how we are using it. Secondly, we must take into account that it does not disturb the ecosystem. And third, that it does not add to the pollution at sea as well as in the environment. So on these three accounts, if we measure the maritime economy on these three measures, so it becomes the blue economy.
Right.
So that is where the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, came into play. Then now these the SDGs. So every country has been mandated through different like Kyoto protocols, and subsequently a lot of protocols have come into play. Of late was the Paris Agreement, and I was also party to. I also participated in the COP29. So a lot of things have been discussed about, and the countries have been given this directions now from the UN side, that you have to abide by these conditions whereby you shift towards these economies. On land it will be green, on sea it will be blue.
It was quite an honor having you on the show tonight. Mr. Vice Admiral, retired Syed, military president of the National Institute of Maritime Affairs. We also look forward in future, in the lead up to this particular exercises 2025 from 7th to 11th of November, for more of interactions and deliberations regarding this important milestone of the Pakistan Navy and National Institute of Maritime Affairs. Thank you once again for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.